and and then we'll be ready to start, continue with the first speaker. So welcome everyone. I hope everyone enjoys today. I know students are going to continue coming in as the day continues. So we hope to have an amazing day like we did yesterday. And thank you for being here, and enjoy and have fun. And I'll give you some information later on, but for right now, let's start with the meditation. Dr. Lamas.
Plug it. I don't really have any presentation. If you have time, then I'll do it. If not, yeah?
Good morning.
Oh, yeah.
Apologize for the technical stuff. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So Andy asked me, Dr. Martial asked me meditation, and what I plan to do was just come here, do 10 minutes of meditation and walk out, and then there's some time, and so I went to get my computer, have a little bit of slide, which I may not be able to present, but so a little bit of a disclaimer about myself. I'm by no means is a teacher of meditation. There are great teachers out there. Really want to run meditation. Give you some direction to that. But what I plan to do today is the theme was Andy asked me that I speak a little bit about the more like loss during the COVID and how to change those things. Again, here I'm not a monk or priest, so I cannot really offer any religious. But what I'd like to share today is because it's international, so maybe I thought I should share how people in my country, in my tradition, like they call, deal with those processes. And so this presentation will not be a typical academic presentation. Maybe not the time if you kind of just accept that. All right, so let's begin with maybe sitting for a couple of minutes. So so let me maybe for most of you here are already meditators. Just in case it is a new thing for you, let me just say basically meditation, what it is really calming your mind. Not just the mind, body, speech, and mind. So there are many definitions. One analogy that I like to use is big teachers. I talked about how our emotions are like a flood, river, if you are inside the river, the flood get carried away, and then you cannot really see the rivers flowing. To meditate is to come out of river and sit outside so you can see the river flowing. It's the same thing when you meditate. You are basically observing all the thoughts, the river of thoughts that flows through your body. And so how your emotions work. That's basically it. But it's a little more complicated when you actually do it. It's actually harder. So we can kind of extend that. It's not just kind of a river and watch the river, emotions, thoughts, maybe fire, mountain, see not just the river, maybe even the winds, trees, and you go further up in the sky, then you can see Earth moving, the totality of the universe, and then further up, you can see how all the things are moving around. And but if you are part of that moving yourself, you can see things that move. So if you're moving yourself, you see things that move you. And at the end of the day, what you notice is that everything is in flux, constant movement. And in a sense, you see that there's nothing that is all things are impermanent. So when somebody is in a time when you've lost somebody that's loved one, what you are really seeing is the impermanence of that life is in reality as suffering. Suffering comes from impermanence. So just knowing that all things are permanent, that's not really intellectually knowing it, being informed of it, or believing in it, or really experientially knowing it for that. That's pretty much what meditation is all about. I'm not really the expert on that. I haven't really mastered that. But so what I like to share is some of the basic techniques that yeah. So I know here everybody's saying comfortably, and one of the things, if you want to do it, is to sit properly. And the way to sit properly, there's no right or wrong. You can sit comfortably, but the traditional method of sitting properly is sitting cross-legged. I would say something like this. This chair is not usual for meditation, so it won't be the most seat. But if you can sit cross-legged, that would be the this approach. Why would we want to do cross-legged? The first thing is when you meditate, so you will have your right arm on the left and put like this. You cross-legged, your arm of your feet has to be facing the purpose of doing sitting like this. When you sit like this, measure. You're not wiggling, you're not like cooling, you're not bending, so the body becomes very symmetric. That's another purpose of that. When your body is very symmetrical, then you can sit like that for forever. Various teachers have sat like that for 6 years, not moving at all. When you sit, so you're not paying attention to any of the thoughts that come to your mind. Just simply observe it. You can do it. The second reason you want to do this sit like this is when you sit like this, your body is still, then your mind will be very still. When your mind is very still, then you can watch the stars that move around. And when you sit still like this, then you're not speaking anymore. But when your mouth is stuck, you're not speaking anymore. Your body is still, and your mind is still. That way you can see everything. That's the basic idea. Everybody follow? Okay. So why don't we just do that for a few minutes? So sit still, wherever you are, let the body maybe spread, not really over the back body. And so head is spread. You can imagine as if like there's something on your head that is pulling to the sitting. You are sitting honorably, not like guilty or proud. That's just straight. And maybe your chin will tilt it so you so let's do that. Then take a deep breathing. Breathe deep all the way to the top. Without your mouth. On now let's breathe more. Like not try to regulate. Just observe. Breathe in, mindful that you're breathing in. Without observe your breath. 2 minutes. Close your eyes or pick a point right in front of you. Depending on your height. Pick one object there. Just concentrate. Not thinking. Let's relax your body. all the way to your forehead, like your eye. Further. Notice this about each bone marrow. There, all the way to the top. Notice all the first year. Meantime, you have assumption one. Just repeat after me. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May I be happy. Be healthy. May I be happy. May all the beings be happy. All the beings be healthy. May all the beings. So, like that, we dedicate meditation, meditate this to all the sentient beings to be everybody happy. And I guess that's all we need to make the place. Everybody to be healthy. So I had prepared some meditation balance difficulties. So just a couple of words on the loss and grieving. I think that's what I was to say. So if you continue meditating like this, then what you will begin to notice is that when you feel grieving, what is it that you're really feeling? Grieving is the feeling of loss. And you feel loss only for one reason. You feel lost because you're attached to that person. If there's no attachment to that person, you wouldn't feel grief. So for example, at any given day, there are hundreds of thousands of people. You're not grieving for this people. You're grieving the person because you're attached to the person. And that you feel lost attachment. So first, we have to understand. So when you grieve, here the person who's suffering is not the person who's already passed away. It's the person who's living. You are actually suffering here. Why do you suffer? Why you see that you're suffering? Emotion. Where does this attachment come from? The attachment comes from because of our contact. Never had a contact. You will never have the attachment. But just because you have a contact doesn't mean you already everybody is in contact. So you feel attached to that person in a certain specific. And that's why you feel grief. And so it has to do with the emotions, relationship. So how do we overcome that? So I think the tradition, my tradition, the way it works is when somebody who passed away, we have to be very, very compassionate with that person who passed away. And generally, depending on the tradition you come from, some traditions, well, the person is dead, she's already in heaven, so all good. This would have been really, really nice if that was really, really entirely true. What really happens, they're partially true. What really happens is not so easy to be heaven so quickly at all. So at the time of the death, the person actually suffers tremendously. Because imagine, if a person could live forever, healthy and happy, never have to die, people probably would choose to live forever. People die because they cannot live. So much suffering, sickness, old age. So sickness is a suffering. Why? Because when you're sick, your body just doesn't feel good. Living becomes a chore. So you can't overcome that. When you get old becomes a suffering because when you're old, what happens is your eyes see something but you can't get there. You want to say something but your mouth tongue just doesn't operate the way you want you see something, you want to go there, but your legs just don't move. A whole host of things happens to you at a point when you cannot bear any longer than you die. So it's a terrible something. So when you're grieving, one way you can help a person who passed away is to have passion for this person. Because you cannot be yourself the center. You have to make the person who passed away the center. You're there. How can you help somebody who already passed away? So there are several ways you can help. But in tradition, at least where I come from, one way we help is the only thing we can do, the best thing we can ever offer to somebody who passed away is to light a candle, or a lamp, and offer it to the higher being, with, or any other spiritual traditions, asking for the higher being to guide that person. That is the best gift. So if you do that every day, focusing on the person, at least until the 49th day. Until the 49th day, because until the 49th day, the person's consciousness is still supposed to be around. Why is it like that? Because when you die, what really happens is there are different aggregates, different elements in the body disintegrate. First thing that happens is your breath, air element leaves your body. Second is your earth elements, which your physical material begins to disintegrate and goes into the body. Then the heat element, which is your fire, that extinguishes and no longer operates. That's what really happens. Then the space element is squeezed. And your body is wound on the other side. Blood, and then it's terrible when the person dies. People feel as if it's a mountain. It's a terrible amount of suffering that happens. We have to feel very compassionate. If we do that, if we make the person who passed away is the center. We're trying to help that person to move into a different higher level. Then that kind of removes the burden on you. So that's how another tradition people deal with grieving. And this is not just an intellectual, academic sort of exercise. You can experience it for yourself. When you meditate, you will understand, you will notice the breath, the importance of breath, because that's where the life is. The moment your breath leaves your body, so as long as you can keep breathing, you will live forever. And of course, it has to be other elements, not just breath. With balance, happy, healthy, peace. But if your body is not functioning that way, then the only way you can see that through is when you meditate. You meditate and you notice everything. So meditation is, in a way, becoming a healer. You want to give the best gift to yourself, the best ever there is. Not well, pain, power, no. Meditation with correction. Practice more regularly. You will find the best gift you can ever give to yourself. Thank you.
Yes. Just right after. Okay, go for it. Move the camera so you can see yourself. No, don't turn off Zoom, please, please. Anybody? I don't need anything. I don't even need a mic.
You don't need to be on video. Broadcast.
Oh, we then get the broadcast back up.
Yeah.
Here now. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. My name is Zach Kowski, and I'm the SERV coordinator, which is a program that we have here at Fresno State that was designed to mitigate the disproportionality in the number of Indigenous social workers and the number of families, Indigenous families that are already in the system. And that's what I do. My base is here at Fresno State. And I'm here basically today to introduce my friend, colleague, Brett Shelton. For more than 25 years, Brett Lee Shelton has been a fierce advocate in the field of Indian law. Prior to joining NARF, Native American Rights, as a staff attorney, Brett spent several years working in private practice and for nonprofits focused on domestic violence response to genetic research. Genetic research, and Indigenous peoples, as well as Indian health policy. He's written extensively on issues including peacemaking, boarding school healing, and Indian health policy. He is taught as a peacemaking trainer, mediation specialist, and international Indigenous rights advocate. Judge Shelton has extensive experience in representing and advising tribal governments, agencies, and enterprises in general governmental, health, and human services, employment, natural resources, construction, and economic business development matters, as well as contributing legal advice to litigation support for various private individuals, businesses, and developmental initiatives. Since April, he has been serving as co-director of the Center of Indigenous Health Policy at Johns Hopkins University and the Bloomberg School of Public Health. So without any further ado, Judge Brett Shelton.
Let me plug in his PowerPoint. You found it.
Yes. Is that a little loud? Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, that's
No, I can hear that.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start. Oh, looks like we're ready too. Okay. Amitakepi. Etokinlewashte. Yuskin Yahilo. Wopila Tanka. I just greeted you as my relatives in Dakota, and I said this is a beautiful day, and I'm happy that you're here. Thank you for coming, and said that I offer you a warm handshake of the heart, basically. That's a traditional greeting. Where my mother's family's from, so that's very cool. And I'm a member of the nation called the called the Sioux Nation. By the colonizers, basically, based on a bad word from a tribal tribe. But we're reclaiming our name, and typically we're called by the name of our reservations. So I'm a member of the Oglala Sioux tribe, which we live on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. But actually our nation, the Ochetishakoni Oyate, the people of the 7 council fires, live on about, I think it's about a dozen to 15 reservations in Montana, both Dakotas, Nebraska, and Minnesota. So that's part of the recovery, is actually kind of claiming who we really are. It's been told by people about a couple generations before me that we needed to start doing that. So we're starting to do it now. That's the long introduction. I want to thank Professor Madrigal for having the insight to see the importance and the potential application of what I have to talk about, some of the work that I do here in the Valley, and then also extending on internationally too. She opened my eyes to the opportunities. So it's an honor to be here, and I hope I live up to that. This review be asked to talk. This mic feels like it's acting a little bit weird, so give me a sign if I get too faint or something. Let's just keep it interactive that way.
You're good. I got volume control right here.
Okay, yeah, I can't totally hear it back. They'll help though. One of the projects that I have at the Native American Rights Fund is called the Indigenous Peacemaking Initiative. That's been in existence since 1992, and it basically helps tribal nations around the United States to implement traditional dispute resolution as opposed to an adversarial process. It grew at NARF, the Native American Rights Fund, out of requests by tribal nations who they were working with to actually help them to re-implement this, because they saw that the adversarial court systems weren't working out so well in certain situations. Big surprise, people with families, right? It doesn't work out so well sometimes. It's not the best system. But they had traditional ways of dealing with things that they recognized had helped them deal with problems that come up between humans over centuries, over millennia sometimes, and continue to live in community. So it helped them effectively deal with their problems going forward. And so that's what they wanted to try to reinstitute or institutionalize within their modern systems. And that's what this program was developed to do. When they hired me about 10 years ago, they were able to really put serious attorney time into it. So we've been building it out ever since. It's pretty exciting. Okay, next now, I can't get my slides.
Okay. I think, see the bottom corner?
Okay, I always like to give, because of the work that they support, like what I get to do, I like to give a nod to what the Native American Rights Fund has done for 54 years now. They started out as a project of California Indian Legal Services, and spun off into their own national-based organization 54 years ago. And they've been at the forefront of Indian law, federal Indian law, for all that time. So whenever there's been cutting-edge issues going on, impact litigation and so on, they've been right there. So fishing cases in the 70s and so on and so on. And this is a piece of it too, what I get to do. And they've always chosen to work based on these 5 priorities that they have here. These were defined by the All Native Board at the foundational time of the organization. And this work that I do is primarily under development of Indian law and education of the public about Indian rights, laws, and issues. It's the development of Indian law part of it, the way that people always dealt with things in their own way, and they want to bring it to their own legal system. I had a YouTube video I was gonna show, but I think we're pressed for time with this, so that's a way that I'll save some time. We have a web page at peacemaking.narc.org, and you can see this video on the bottom of the page if you're interested. I recommend it because we have I think there's about 8 peacemakers who I get to work with and who guide my work, talking about their experiences there, so they get some really good examples of cases. And they're from all over the country and Alaska and everything too, so it's like a broad range of people doing work in their communities with the people there and telling their stories about it, so it's pretty neat. Some amazing stories that they refer to all within like an 8-minute video. This is what we do with the project. We collect models from other tribes, so nobody has to recreate the wheel. And we just basically share it online. You can find these on the web pages, written things, laws and guidelines, rules, and so on about peacemaking to help implement it at a local level. It can be used by anybody, but we work within the tribal government system, so within their tribal constitutions, under restrictions placed by federal law sometimes, and so on. But it can be adapted to any situation. That's where the lawyering comes in a lot of times. Is how do you write stuff that's going to make it fit into each existing situation, whatever that may be. And then we do trainings. We train people on how to be peacemakers or facilitators of peace circles, and also train people in the community about what this thing is that's going to be happening. Just the public awareness of it is really important in order to make it work. And also training outside in communities outside that might interface. So I think that's where Zach provided me such a kind introduction. First became aware of what we were doing is we were doing a training that was talking about this for tribal communities and for people who work outside of those tribal communities and with those tribal communities, so that they would know what was going on when the tribes start to implement this, and they wouldn't be afraid of it, they would be supportive of it. Guess what? It worked. That showed his support. And then technical assistance, that's the lawyering again, that's the writing and that sort of thing, and helping figure out how to make the systems work. And then advocacy, which is basically being in support of what we do, maybe talking to the state courts that when tribes do this within their system, the state courts ought to give those decisions by those tribal processes, both faith and credit, for example. That sort of advocacy is really important. Recently, I've had I get interest from state courts all the time about how can they implement it in their courts too, which is really interesting. There's a court in Michigan who has implemented peacemaking pretty regularly in the processes. I did a case as a peacemaker in one of their cases in the Michigan court, just to try it out because I was visiting the judge. It works well. They even did a wrongful death case in that court using these methods. So it can be used for all sorts of things. A definition of peacemaking is it could be a traditional Native American approach to problem solving that focuses importantly on healing and restoring relationships between the parties in disagreement and others. And it's both of those. It's the healing and restoring, not just focusing on the parties, but focusing on others outside of it they have relationships with. So if you think about a family, for example, that's having difficulties, maybe you've got a custody issue. Maybe there's something, the parents are arguing over this child, the parents are breaking up. So it's a bit of a breakdown in the family already. Maybe you have a parent who is being at risk of having the system judge them as not being a good parent. You might look at the relationship between the parties and how can you make that beneficial with respect to the child, rather than fighting each other in court and trying to tear each other down in court and say why the other isn't the best parent. Might think instead about how do we deal with this kind of triangular relationship with the child and make that the best thing possible for the interest of the child. And then you also might look at each parent and say, are there relationships in their life that are not serving them so well or not serving them the way that they would need? And is there a way to either correct that relationship or supplement, put a replacement into that relationship? So a totally different approach than anything adversarial, right? And then that's traditionally the way these sorts of problems are dealt with. And from what I've seen working with hundreds of tribes across the country, and by limited exposure that I've had to international groups of indigenous people who are still operating in their own life ways too. Then this chart reflects what's really going on. Is there's really a difference of worldview at heart here. Over on the right-hand side, we have basically what's the American system, legal system for the most part, but also it's a worldview conceptual system. The legal system is based in this worldview. So on the right side, we talk a lot about rights. We talk about parental rights. And if you study rights, if you think about rights, rights are generally granted by a sovereign. So when we have rights, how do we know? Because the laws tell us we have rights. So usually that's the state. Sometimes it's the municipality, sometimes it's the county. sometimes it's the federal government, and even in the case of the United States, rights come from somewhere, but so you get to the Constitution, and those rights, I think, come from God, according to the way that it looks to me, anyway. I think they're inalienable rights, divine providence. So they're always granted by a higher up. I think that system probably traces back as much as you can say into Europe and about the Dark Ages, when the church was trying to become a political force, where you start to have the lords who own the land and the monarchy and so on, and then there's the different layers of people. So the rights come from the higher up. That's where that comes from, and then the rights are held against others. So when do we go protect our rights? When somebody infringes on our rights, we take them to court, or we ask police to intervene or whatever. And so where do we go? We go to a higher authority, somebody who can enforce our rights, we vindicate our rights. If you think about it, people tend to get more bent out of shape if somebody equal to or lower than them infringes their rights, and then they kind of suck it up. There's somebody over them at a higher social level than them infringes their rights, because I think there's not so much I can really do about it. So I don't know, for an example, I remember some state senator in my home state of South Dakota hit somebody when they were driving from like 65 miles an hour through a small town. The speed limit was 35. And the implication was that that person wasn't going to be found guilty of doing anything wrong for driving through that town that way. That's why, because it was a person higher up in a hierarchy. So that particular event hit the news, and so there was a little more public accountability. He was on the verge of getting acquitted, but I don't know what really happened. I should probably research that before I pull it up as an example. But my point is that there's this kind of assumption that somebody higher up might not necessarily be held accountable as easily for infringement of somebody's rights when that somebody is lower on the ladder base. And on the other side of the chart here, corresponding to rights are 4 different R's in rights. And increasingly in Native American studies, these 4 R's are kind of becoming prominent as a way to explain in English what's going on in the indigenous worldview, as opposed to this system of rights and hierarchy. Instead, we have relationship, respect, responsibility, and reciprocity are primary values that we try to enforce within indigenous worldviews. And we try to extend that to law. So like where I'm from, when I came back from law school and went home, the traditional people would tell me, right, you learned about law, but you really need to learn about natural law now. And what they were talking about is our life. It's encoded in our language and so on. And it's these 4 things instead of the system of rights, it's the system of these. So for example, with respect to, say, I always like to use a tree for an example. If one of those trees out there has a leaf that's medicinal, and I'm aware of that medicinal value, that doesn't give me the right to go out and pick that leaf or do anything to that tree and to interact with it. Instead, from a Lakota worldview, and I would say probably from a lot of indigenous worldviews, I have a certain responsibility to that tree before I do that, and a certain responsibility about how I'm supposed to act. And that would require that I learn about and enter into the right relationship with that tree before I actually make use of that medicinal quality. So I have this responsibility to develop the relationship and to be aware of the relationship. And that relationship probably includes reciprocity of probably since I make an offering in exchange for the medicine that I'm about to take. But it will also include the responsibility to learn about what it is I'm trying to do and how to do that in the best way, in the way that's least offensive to that tree and most effective for my purposes. So if it's the leaf that holds the medicine, I have to learn that I don't go and peel off the bark when I do it. I don't just snap a branch necessarily. Maybe I just gather the leaf. And maybe the medicinal quality is strongest at a certain time of year, which happens, right? Because the plants come forth in the spring and they got certain energies and certain chemical processes going on, and they kind of have full ripeness at a certain time, and then they wither. Sometimes when they've withered is the best time to take some things, because the medicinal qualities start to concentrate, they fall back into the plant, into the roots. So there's a responsibility basically to learn all of this before I interact with that plant to take that medicine. And so that's a whole different system than rights, isn't it? I'm not talking about, now if I put my Western hat back on, with respect to that tree, taking that leaf, how do I get the right to take that leaf? Well, if I own the tree, then I get to do whatever I want to with the tree. And how do I own the tree? Well, I own the land underneath the tree. Well, if I don't own the land, are there other ways? Yeah, I can get permission from the owner. So maybe here on campus, I could get permission from the school to go ahead and pick that if they care. But otherwise, if I go start cutting the tree or digging up the roots because I want to get medicinal properties, probably the landowner is going to say, hey, wait a minute, you don't have the right to do that. And so they might make me accountable under law, so they would appeal to a higher authority. They'll give me a ticket or sue me for the damages or whatever. But to me, this is a 180 degrees worldview shift. There's two absolutely different things going on. But within tribal culture, this way of life is still included in our languages, and it's still the way we act. And I grew up speaking English first, but I knew how to act. I was taught not to interact with other living things without that respect, basically, or to be slow at least before I go do stuff. So this stuff carries on. A lot of times you're living with these things, but the fish doesn't know it's in water. And as I've learned about cultures of people from south of the United States, I see a lot of indigenous things going on in just mainstream culture. First time I went to Mexico City was the first time I went to Mexico without just being at a border town or whatever. And I saw all sorts of things like, wow, this is more indigenous living here. There's more indigenous worldviews, there's more indigenous socialization going on than I see in the United States. And similarly with other countries. There's a lot going on, and I think understanding this shift in worldview makes it easier to make a lot of sense of it. Start to open the world up a little bit. Going back to looking at the systems, back over onto the right-hand column, experts in our legal system in the United States are basically brought in to fight for us. That's attorneys. We get people who are adept at playing with the rules. We get expert witnesses in custody cases to try to tell why one parent is best or why one situation is more suitable for the child. And then the experts also decide for us, and that's the judges. We put on this big fight in front of the neutral third party, and then the neutral third party is to decide who wins, basically. Over on the other side, in a traditional dispute resolution system, the experts do different things. First off, they facilitate a discussion between the parties. They're not adept fighters, they're adept helpers of people to discuss difficult things. And that's what a peacemaker does. And that's what a lot of the trainings we do focus on, is how do you help people who are emotionally charged. They're dealing with stuff that's very important to them, and they've gotten emotionally involved in it in a deep way. How do you help them discuss that in a way that's going to lead to a solution eventually? And then the other thing that experts do within this context of peacemaking is they provide values, or they're reminders, or sometimes repository of cultural values. Values are really important as a group. In order to reach a decision, you have to decide what values you decide based on. And then, if you think about brainstorming, you generate a lot of ideas, and then you start to sort through the ideas and pick the ones that are really possible and that seem best. And how do you do that? Well, you're looking at values. And this actually be done, and which values does it serve? But when you live in community for a long time, you develop core values that you all share with each other in order to keep living together and to cooperate together. So in a lot of Native nations, there's certain values that the people will hold as like, these are traditional values of our people. So for Lakotas, there's 4 values that we say are traditional Lakota values, or sometimes we say there's 7. We're all split up into all these different reservations, right? So even